to the latest edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside our NBA insider, Bill Ryder, who I think you've just been plugged in for the last, since Saturday, right? You've just been.
Is today Sunday?
You?
What day of the week is it?
Have you had any water? Do you have water for tonight?
I texted Aaron earlier, what's the plan for the Sunday trade deadline show? And he wrote back, the trade deadline's not Sunday, man. And I wrote back, is today Wednesday? Nope.
Fantastic. So we just got done with Celtics and Cavs. Celtics ended up beating the Cavs 112-105. We're going to get into that a little bit later, but there's so much going on because it's trade deadline week. So we're going to start with that, including the report from Jared Greenberg as the Lakers are playing the Clippers right now that barring any setbacks, Luka is supposed to have his first 5-on-5 workout tomorrow. First one since Christmas, I believe, since before Christmas. And barring any setbacks at that, Bill, he is set to make his season debut on Saturday for the Lakers. And you were at his press conference today.
I was, yeah. And I actually sat next to my buddy, Jared Greenberg, who's one of my favorite people in the beat on the business. And, that guy couldn't get the news, beforehand, so he could slip it to me and we could break it together, John. Selfish, Jared. So this was, so this makes sense because there's a lot from that press conference to unpack. And I did write something for CBSSports.com that for me, at least, I like covering LeBron sort of like Kremlinology, right? LeBronology, just what it all means. And there's that CBSSports.com column is interesting. But there's a lot of things that happened. And one was Pelinka said that Luka was going to start 5-on-5 drills tomorrow. And they had a very sort of optimistic tone about when Luka would play. And you know how us media are, John. There were some people around me that might have hurt themselves straining to roll their eyes. But obviously they were being pretty straightforward. So I think this was sort of forecast, and why not? Like if you're gonna go get Luka Doncic, let's get it going if he's ready to go.
Get it going. I watched that press conference. One of the things that stood out to me, there's been this narrative, everybody's trying to read the tea leaves on why did the Mavs do this trade. And one of the narratives that has popped up is that, hey, he's constantly out of shape. He's injured. He's let his body go. From my eye on the television camera, Bill, and tell me what you saw up close and personal. He didn't look chunky to me. He looked fine.
He looked good. He looked sad. By the way, I thought he looked like not sad. He looked bewildered. Usually people when they arrive at the Lakers are beaming, right? And
sure.
Rob Pelinka,
he lost
and I don't know if
millions of dollars in that trade.
He did. He lost $116 million. When Rob Pelinka, I don't know if it got caught on camera. Right. All of it. You're right. Even more. When Pelinka and Doncic started to walk toward the media, sort of off in the distance of the court, and everybody went quiet, Pelinka had the biggest 10,000 watt smile I've ever seen. It's like it was amazing. It was unbelievable. One thing about the injury that I thought was really interesting. Because Luka was asked, and I think it was by Jared Greenberg, actually. Jared's getting a lot of love, and he deserves it. NBA on TNT guy. He was asked by Jared, hey, you've had this same calf injury 3 or 4 times now. What is to, stop this from becoming a potentially recurring problem? And if I remember right, John, I think this came on the heels. We're right in the same sort of tenor and tone of questions about, hey, the Mavs think you're a fat loser. They said it nicer, but that was kind of the thing. Is it true?
Yeah.
Right, paraphrasing. And Luka's answer on the calf thing I thought was really interesting. It doesn't mean it's true, but it was, well, in those situations, he said, I rushed back. I tried to get back on the floor, and now I'm going to take my time. And it sort of felt like his way of saying, very subtly, hey, they can say I was out of shape. My hearing of this was, they can say I was out of shape. I was always coming back early to try to compete for this team and kept getting hurt. So there were all these sort of messages within, I thought, the press conference that were being sent. And if you're a Lakers fan, that's one you want to hear. And Rob Pelinka went out of his way to say, we're welcoming Luka's personal trainers and medical folks into our family. And so there was really an effort to make it sound like we're going to work with Luka on his injuries. Everything's going to be great. And Luka, I thought, said, hey, man, I've always been out there trying to get it out too early. I'm not going to do that this time. I'll be back when I'm ready.
Injuries are tricky too, right? We've seen previously with other athletes, KD most notably in 2019 when he came back too soon, ended up blowing out his Achilles. You don't want to do that. That's why Giannis ended up sitting during the playoffs last year. And producer Aaron points this out, and this is a good point as well. Tough to do cardio when you've got a messed up calf, right? So for him to go to that presser today and looking bewildered and sad and whatever, but not looking bloated and large and in charge.
Svelte. Is that the word? Like, he looked good.
I liked his fit today.
The sweater?
The sweater looked good with the shirt. I thought Rob Pelinka was really pushing the the midlife crisis vibes with the leather jacket, but it is LA, so you get some.
It's also Rob Pelinka. That's kind of he's like in a perpetual midlife crisis in a good way. Rob, if you're watching, in a good way.
I mean, hey, he pulled off the trade. It was when he said I forget what the phrasing there was, but it was like something like a gift to have Luka on the team, but he didn't mean it in that way, like that he was gifted, but he was gifted Luka. So
I have
keep an eye on that. Yeah, you have the exact quote.
I'm just somewhere in these notes because it absolutely stuck. Because the thing that really stuck out to me, and I went back and listened to this twice to make sure I wasn't wrong. Rob Pelinka did not mention LeBron James a single time. He meant, so many people were mentioned in this thing. LeBron wasn't brought up. And so Luka is a gift, and Luka is the player we're going to build around. And Luka is the centerpiece of, and it wasn't starting over, but it was starting now. To me, the absolute takeaway of this is that this is a Luka Doncic project, and it's not about Luka and LeBron. Yeah. But look, I think there were questions about, maybe Rob went out of his way to say, we're not going to go get a bunch of help. We're not going to win a championship this year. He said it in a sort of subtle way, but
a little, I'm not sure I buy that part, but I think just by
there's no center market.
The fact that Luka is 15 years younger than LeBron, the actuarial table would say that it has to be a Luka project, right? Because
but John, I think
forever.
I think they went further than that. Like maybe you and I heard it differently. What I heard was, I didn't hear the name LeBron James from Rob Pelinka. What you should say if it's okay, great, Luka and LeBron 2 or 3 years, we're gonna try to win in this window. We're gonna spend some assets to make that work. Is LeBron James and Luka are gonna be a great pairing? Can't wait to see Luka play with LeBron. You wouldn't know LeBron James played for this team if Dave McMenamin from ESPN hadn't asked Luka about LeBron. And I thought Luka gave a very earnest, I love this guy, I can't wait answer. But I think it was, and I wrote about this, I think it was pretty telling that if LeBron's here, great. But I think the LeBron era is over in LA. I think his sway evaporated when Nico Harrison called Rob Pelinka and said, to your point, here is a gift. Take it.
Yeah, it really is. Be sure to check out Bill's column on said subject on CBSSports.com. Trade deadline week is off and running. This is it's been a crazy week already, Bill.
Yeah.
And let's go through a couple more things that have started to percolate over the last, say, 24 hours. You've got some new reporting?
I do. So it's very minimal.
Okay.
I'm going to start with the biggest story about Kevin Durant. Yeah. And I want to do this with some
little buzz.
Yeah. Reporting out there that maybe he could be available. There's different reporters out there sort of suggesting where that could be. He is not going to play tomorrow, which, could just be preventative or banged up. It could also be what you do when you're about to trade a guy. There's just a lot out there. So Kevin Durant or anyone else, please click on the video right now if this gets cut and watch everything I'm about to say, whatever the headline is. Okay, Katie?
I don't know what you're referring to, Bill. Go ahead.
So, John, you know how this works. Like when you're doing reporting, you try to get information and you try to get multiple sources. And sometimes you're under pressure to report a single source story, and we do it, and you can get burned. Certainly it's happened to me. I reached out to a source of the Suns who's very, very high up. And they told me, I'm just going to say this, but I want people to watch the whole video, that I'm going to read it now, that the idea of KD being available is, quote, absolutely not true. The focus has been on Jimmy Butler. But my sort of alarms went a little bit, like this person's good, but not always right. And I tried to get it confirmed. And usually with this organization, usually I can reach out with, I heard this from somebody, can you confirm it? And the silence that came back was a little strange. So not tweeting this out, not putting a report out. And I talked to another GM about this, John, just trying to figure out what's going on. And their point was, look, I don't know who your source is, obviously, Bill, but I can tell you that other rival GMs are hearing the same sort of rumors that are out there. And this GM said to me, it's worth just noting, they just compartmentalized enough in Dallas and LA that people that would normally have been in the information loop weren't. And Rob Pelinka told us it was 3 or 4 weeks that these conversations went on. So the first part is, I don't know what's going on with Kevin Durant, but there are certainly high-level people within the Suns who don't, or saying that it's not true. And I'm sort of skeptical based on everything else that's out there, but I don't have it.
Okay. Well, all I'll say is that all of a sudden over the last 24 hours, there's a lot of chatter among our NBA colleagues. and in
Mhm.
people who follow the league, who all of a sudden are talking about Kevin Durant. John Hollinger was just talking about it on social media today about how, hey, if you did a 3-team deal with Kevin Durant and Jimmy Butler getting to his desired destination with the Phoenix Suns, then all of a sudden you don't need Bradley Beal to waive his no trade clause because you loop in a third team and those salaries are going to match up. There are a lot of very smart people that we respect that are our colleagues around the league that are talking about
Yes,
this right
I'm with you. I'm just telling you what I was told, and that I not sure if I buy. It's also worth noting that if you move on from Durant and you do this in a way that's a rebuild. So this is the other thing that I'm skeptical about, but it's not. It's just me being skeptical, not reporting. Matt Ishbia has not shown himself as it relates to being a basketball person to be particularly good at that. So that he's had a total change of heart would be an impressive performance by, I presume, James Jones, someone else close to him, to talk him into it. But the thing is, to your point, if you are doing a rebuild, if it's an if Durant moves the next 2 days, and nothing surprises me now after Luka and
Sure.
AD, it becomes a lot easier to move Bradley Beal, because Bradley Beal's not going to want to play there if they're rebuilding around Devin Booker, potentially, right? Maybe it's a little bit easier.
Okay, well, here's the thing about this. Before we get to, and we should mention that our guy Sam Quinn wrote about a whole bunch of different landing spots for Kevin Durant for CBSSports.com. Sam is extremely smart. Highly recommend you read that piece as well after you're done reading Bill's column on the whole Luka situation. Here's my thing about this. If they move this, if they end up moving Kevin Durant, then I think it's almost kind of malpractice, because not because they shouldn't blow it up. I actually think that they should, because as we record this here, they are what in the Western Conference? They are 9th in the Western Conference, functionally tied with the Kings and the Warriors, and the Mavericks as well. The Mavericks on the outside of the play-in right now looking in. They just traded an unprotected 2031 draft pick to Utah for 3 marginal first rounders. If you're going to move Kevin Durant now after unloading an unprotected 31 draft pick, what are you doing? That franchise, you have to like pull Ishbia aside and be like, listen, man, you've screwed this up about 10 different ways.
The emperor has no clothes. It's such a great point. And yeah, I mean, here's the thing. The Suns aren't well run. Breaking news. They're horribly run under Matt Ishbia. And I think their GM probably has to be the the sort of face of decisions he's not making or not wanting to make. But but John, and you're right. I totally agree with you. I'll just add, nothing Dallas did made sense 2 days ago.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. Although it doesn't necessarily excuse it, right? I mean, there was a report on what was it, The Athletic, that part of the Mavericks' hope is that they were also targeting Kevin Durant, that they hope one day they can pair Kevin Durant with Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving. Now, how you're going to pull that off salary-wise, I have absolutely no idea.
Sam Quinn had it. He did it on I didn't look at it, but it's basically 38 jigsaw pieces. Sure. So here's the other thing. Again, we're going into ifs here.
Sure.
If you're a Suns executive and you know me and you haven't texted me back, please do. I'd like to know what the hell's going on. Just for the sake of this conversation, so it's an if they're actually open to trading Kevin Durant and they're committed to a rebuild, which means that they're not trying to win in 2025 or 26, when do they get more from him, now or in the summer? It's now, right? It's like all primed to probably make a push at a minimum.
Maybe, but if you are now, I have a few problems with this. Is it that you just figured out this course of action in the last 24 to 48 hours? Because if you were previously targeting Jimmy Butler, and I just keep coming back to this 2031 unprotected first, because it could be really attractive, right? You have to have more foresight than just like 2 days in front of you. 2 days ago, they were thinking, hey, we're trying to land Jimmy Butler. We're going to turn this unprotected pick into 3 marginal first round picks that are going to be back end of the first round. Like, you have to be able to, like, if this was even a possibility, it can't just be that you dreamed it up in the last 48 hours. That's just like such bad mismanagement.
Here's the thing. And like, I'm always I'm basically sharing reporting that's incomplete, because I just want to give people watching.
We're talking it through. It's the trade deadline week.
Right. Again, I'm looking at the text right now. Absolutely not true is the text, followed by the focus has been on Jimmy Butler. Again, I have some skepticism about that. I don't know that that's true. But your points, John, that the moves the Suns have made and giving away that unprotected pick in 31 for a bunch of not very valuable second round picks would lend itself to the idea that maybe the Suns are not interested in trading Kevin Durant. And I do want to say this too, and I'm going to pick on somebody here who reported it. I'm not going to say who it is unless you want me to name check this guy. I don't know him. But this is something that actually a Sun source said to me too, the same Sun source, and other people said. And I haven't been able to consume everything because I'm busy, you're busy, but one of the main reports I saw was someone saying the Suns are taking phone calls about Kevin Durant. But the report went on, they're not yet ready to deal him, but let's stay tuned. Everyone takes phone calls about it. I have talked to today and yesterday 10 or 11 GMs in the NBA, right? They're busy. Some of them, hey, Bill, I'm not going to tell you anything. I'm busy. Leave me alone. Some talk longer. If I can get them on the phone, any of their colleagues can get them on the phone and say, hey, do you want to trade Kevin Durant? No, man, I don't. Okay, good talking. That's a call about Kevin Durant. So it's hard. I don't know. I don't have the information, but calls about KD is not the same thing as substantive conversations about Kevin Durant.
Fair enough. But as you know, and as I know, and as all these other people, there's a lot of whispers going on, and like
there is mania.
Crazier things have literally happened this week. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on that. We mentioned Jimmy Butler. We're going to discuss him after a quick break and the latest on where things stand with him and the Heat. That's coming up. This is Beyond the Arc.
Gives it to Jenkins for the championship. A 16 beats a 1. From sweet to elite to the Final Four.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. We want to thank everybody who's joining us live on YouTube. You can find us at Beyond the Arc CBS. Please hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and the little bell symbol. If you click on that, you'll get notified when we go live. You want to do that because it's trade deadline week, and who knows when we could be hopping on. Something big could happen, and we'll have an emergency show for you. So be sure to stick with us. And if you're here for a little Celtics and Cavs talk, that's coming up, so don't go anywhere. But first, a little Jimmy Butler conversation, Bill. There was some report from Mark Spears we can get to in just a second, but what do you got so far?
By the way, you and I have been working together for more than a year, so we're not quite like an old married podcast couple. But I feel like I have a good sense of you. I know you don't love vibes reporting, so I'm going to give you some vibes reporting. Do you like the vibes reporting?
Yeah, let's
You're into it. Yeah, so I talked to a bunch of people today, including people in the Heat organization, and they have obviously not told me here's our exact plan, or else I would have reported that over the last few days. But I talked to them. I can't remember when. At some point before LeBron James told me I was a bleeping liar. So I guess Saturday or earlier. And there was some stress. And I think you and I have talked about this on the podcast. It sounded like they were up against it. They are so calm in that organization right now. And they just told me maybe we'll deal him. Maybe we won't. It's going to be what it's going to be. The impression that I get is they have gotten the Heat to a place where they have accepted. And sometimes when you just accept things as they are, then you're not anxious anymore about it. They have accepted that they are going to either get the deal they want, whatever that is, right? Maybe Pat Riley will come down a little bit on that in the next whatever we're at, 36 hours, a little bit less than that maybe. Or they're going to have Jimmy Butler on the roster and he's going to have to deal with that. And I've talked to some rival GMs who, you sort of ask them what's going to happen, whose percentage chances that Jimmy Butler is going to be a member of the Heat have increased a lot. These are their guess from even 3 or 4 days ago.
Well,
tell me.
Well, I was gonna say, so people are starting to wonder, like we've said previously, it's a non-zero chance, but surely I thought surely they'll just take whatever they can get. These two sides have to go their separate ways. So Chris Haynes has a report today that Jimmy told the Heat that he's in shape and ready to play, and that he'll talk to other teams once the Heat get a deal in the red zone, like getting close to doing it, right? And that once there's a deal in the red zone, the Heat will give another team permission to talk to Jimmy. Well, apparently the extra sentence here is no team has yet asked for permission. And then Wendy followed it up with Jimmy has so far blocked several trade options that would have been good fits. So yeah, Bill, vibes wise, now all of a sudden you're like, I wonder.
I think the Heat are kind of over it. And here's the other thing. And I know this and I brought it up and they certainly will bring it up. They have the same basically record with Jimmy Butler as without Jimmy Butler this regular season. The sample size is large. I understand the playoffs are different. I understand if Jimmy's healthy, he's a sort of a differential factor. He's a ceiling raiser. I just think in Miami, they're over him, John. And I also, and I sort of speculated this to you a week or two ago, and it's more than speculation now, having just talked to folks. They also just think they have the upper hand. They think that their path forward to suspending Jimmy Butler without pay for a very, very long time is easier and wider and less troubled if they want to. They have been able to document the fact that he missed a flight, that he acted out from their perspective right in the shoot around. So I think whereas maybe in the past, a month, how long has it been going on? Weeks ago,
Sure.
They were worried they'd have to eat this entire contract. He has a player option. He could just pick it up, give me my whatever, $55 million, whatever dollars it is. I think the Heat now feel like they're in a pretty good position. If he's on the roster, that they can require him to perform at the level they expect. And if he, and act the way they want. And if they don't, I think they feel pretty comfortable that they can keep suspending him and keep doing it without paying him.
I don't know that because he is designated as a star player and he has said he's healthy. And like with the CBA, if he reports and says, I don't know that you can just mothball him. I mean, maybe
I'm not saying that. I'm saying not mothball him, but they can say, here are the standards. And if Jimmy Butler shows up and meets them, gives effort, doesn't have attitude, comes to shoot around, great. But I think you've reached a point now where if Jimmy Butler comes to shoot around on, March 1st, and rolls his eyes and mutters under his breath at Spoelstra or whatever, and the Heat say conduct detrimental to the team, 10 days, the Heat, I think, I would speculate, they think that they're in a much more solid position to win that fight with the players than they were before because Jimmy's given them the ammunition. So my point isn't like go sit on the bench. It's they feel like they've got the upper hand now where he either plays well and acts exactly the right way, or he doesn't. And the boy that cried wolf isn't going to be believed if the Heat say that he cried wolf again.
I'm almost rooting for this scenario. On the one hand,
bad.
Just to see like these two sides, the bed that they made, and now they both have to lie in it when they thought that they were going to get to kick one of them out of bed, and now all of a sudden they're like back to trying to figure out how this works. Crazy stuff for Jimmy Butler. We'll be sure to keep an eye on that too as this week continues. Trade deadline coming up at 3 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. We're going to have a live show after the deadline. You and I are going to be on CBS Sports HQ on Thursday right after the deadline. And then after that, we'll be live on YouTube. So come and check us out here on YouTube at Beyond the Arc CBS. Should we talk a little basketball? There was a game tonight, pretty big game between number 1 and number 2.
Still games going on?
In the Eastern Conference, there are games coming on. Dennis Schroeder mentioned this earlier today. He mentioned a bunch of stuff that I'm not going to get into all of it, but Dennis Schroeder had said that the trade deadline does a disservice to the NBA because basically nobody's focused on the games during this week. Everybody's talking about the trades. And I think it's the opposite. I understand that he's a player and sometimes they get in their feelings about being moved. And there are like actual personal things. They're humans, right? You get moved. Right. It sucks. Right. He's been traded 5 times. I get it. I did a trade deadline piece for the Ringer one time about like just what it's like as a human to like go out there and have to deal with this. However,
it's a good idea.
It's really fascinating and entertaining for those of us who cover the league and like basketball, right? I mean, it's like a big topic this weekend going into the Super Bowl week. What happened? People were up at like 12:30, 1 o'clock Eastern talking about the Luka trade and losing their minds. So I think it's actually good for the league. However, as I mentioned, Celtics at Cavs tonight. Celtics get past the Cavs in Cleveland, 112-105. The Celtics have now won 2 of the 3 meetings against the Cavs this year. They are an NBA best 20-6 on the road. Bill, not a great shooting night for either team here. A little bit of a rock fight to start this game. The Cavs now have double-digit losses. Took them until, February to get their 10th loss of the game. I thought Donovan Mitchell showed up in a pretty big game, but on the whole, not a great shooting night for the Cavs, not a great shooting night for the Celtics, but the Celtics win the game.
So full disclosure, I watched this game up until when Jalen Brunson scored the first 11 or 13 points. Then my phone rang with a bunch of NBA. I literally was on the phone talking to NBA sources for most of the game, half paying attention. And then I watched sort of the end. So I'm going to lean on you a little more for this. I will say this as a top line takeaway. It does reinforce for me this game. And I know that Donovan Mitchell played really well. Maybe we should talk about that. That's a really good sign for Cleveland.
Yes.
But what I was able to see and what I sort of consumed right before we came on, it's not as if Boston shot 48% from the 3-point line. This feels like a good matchup for the Celtics. It just still feels like when we get to the playoffs, it's hard to bet against Boston as the favorite. Again, I'm going to lean on you. I was doing sourcing calls for a lot of the night, but what I consumed, I just felt like, man, as good as Donovan Mitchell was in the fourth quarter, which I did watch, like without being uninterrupted. I just think Boston's a better basketball team when they play Cleveland.
Cavs got off to a really, really bad shooting night. We've had this is the first quarter shot.
Was it good defense, or was it just like
the defense was fine, but it was mostly just they got a lot of really clean looks and they didn't go down. Actually, for both teams, the first quarter was sort of an abomination. It was a really slow start. The problem is that Boston course corrected after that, and the Cavs didn't get going until the second half. And by then, they almost closed the gap. They had a pretty big deficit, and Donovan Mitchell was really coming on strong, but the lead proved to be too much here. I'm a little less concerned. I think that these two teams are pretty evenly matched. Don't forget that the Celtics, they've now won 4 in a row, but there was that chunk of January where they had not played well at all. So like they started off the season 21-5. They're 15-10 since, but that includes this 4-game winning streak. And by the way, not for nothing, Jayson Tatum, I know that you flagged this last season going into the playoffs, and it's something this season where he came out, he was shooting really well to start the year. Well, in January, I don't have his numbers in front of me right now, but I was looking at them earlier. He had a terrible shooting January, and he didn't have a good shooting night tonight either. So just like, look, they all went through a really streaky stretch, the Celtics did, during that stretch where after they started 21-5 and they had been 11-10, they like shooting wise, they were just all in this slump. Well, a lot of them, including Derek White, have snapped out of it. Jayson Tatum shooting wise kind of still hasn't.
And by the way, I have said to you a bunch, and I may be wrong, not worried about the Celtics. They're going to figure it out. You're right. Some of these guys started to shoot better when they were on that run where they just couldn't shoot very well. But if you're not the same team, just in terms of efficiency that you were last year, and Jayson Tatum, these are two big ifs, is a little unreliable in the playoffs. That's a bad combination. Last year, Jayson Tatum, well, first of all, Jayson Tatum commanded a lot of doubles and a lot of gravity. And so he probably didn't get enough credit for, maybe he's not, his box score doesn't jump out, but his impact on the game does. And I understand that. But it's easier to sort of have your superstar, obviously guy wasn't the finals MVP, not play it as the best player on the floor most nights and still win a championship if your team is shooting 40-some% from the three-point line. The stretch the Celtics have had where they struggled shooting is just an interesting, if they struggle for stretches in the playoffs, is Jayson Tatum capable of just single-handedly taking over games the way that Donovan Mitchell, by the way, did in the fourth quarter?
That's kind of where I like default to with these two teams. I do think they're the two best teams in the Eastern Conference, although the Knicks have impressed me this season. But ultimately, if these two teams play, whose shot's falling? They both have a lot of shooters. I think that the Celtics have more two-way players, but ultimately, whose shot is falling? Like if you're going to have a hot night from, 2 or 3 of your guys, you're going to be set up pretty well. Tonight, pretty much nobody was hot until Donovan Mitchell got going for the Cavs, and then for the Celtics, end of the game, Derek White hit some really big shots. So that's what it really is.
He's so good.
Yeah. I mean, my guy Mike Pina over at the Ringer put this up tonight. We remember when we were talking about Jamal Murray and like where does he fall among players who are never going to make not only All NBA but still doesn't have an All-Star
ever.
Is Derek White the best player in the NBA right now who might not make an All-Star team? He should have been a replacement pick last year.
Maybe.
Do you have him above Jamal Murray? Jamal Murray was the first guy that came to mind.
So recency bias.
Because he's so good defensively.
Here's the thing, and this doesn't make sense. It may be the sleep deprivation or just my general sort of, brain. It doesn't work just when I'm sleeping. I want to say Jamal Murray is the better basketball player, but I would rather have Derek White on my team. So I guess that answers the question.
Jamal Murray is, I guess, the more dynamic player, at least offensively.
Yeah, that's it. But higher ceiling. I could see him being a superstar even still, right? If he could be consistent.
Derek White, for me, it does all the, how much I love the little things in basketball. He does all the little things in basketball, like making the right pass, the extra pass. He's basically switchable for sure 1 through 4 in a pinch 1 through 5. Yeah, he's so good defensively. And also this year, Jrue Holiday has had like a little bit of, and I'll call it inconsistent. I love Jrue Holiday. He's one of my favorite players of this era for sure. But Jrue Holiday has had a little bit of an inconsistent season. And the redundancy that you have there with Derek White, where Derek White is just like, oh, I do all the same things as Jrue Holiday. And while Jrue Holiday is having a little bit of a hiccup, yes, I went through a shooting slump, Derek White, but my shot's going to fall eventually. And we saw that tonight and recently where it's all of a sudden, oh yeah, that's the Derek White that this team needs. So yeah, I think he's a really talented player. Do we want to, some other things happened in the NBA tonight. One thing happened with the Philadelphia 76ers. Do we want to discuss that while we're here?
I mean, I wasn't even going to bring it up because I feel like I'm kind of being a jerk sometimes because it's the same exact conversation we always have. When Embiid plays, he's amazing. And when he's amazing, do you want to do this now or do you want to break and come back?
Let's take a break. And then on the other side, we'll talk about Joel Embiid out of nowhere where all this other stuff is swirling around. The Sixers made a trade earlier today. And then Joel Embiid, the Phantom of Philadelphia, returns to the basketball court tonight and has a big game. So we'll talk about that briefly on the other side. That's coming up. This is Beyond the Arc. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. Just a reminder, we are also a podcast. You can find us wherever you get your favorite shows. Please download, subscribe, leave a review. And on Spotify, if you look below the play button on the Spotify app in full screen mode, you'll be able to leave us a comment about the show. All right, so earlier today, Sixers made a minor move. They send Caleb Martin to the Dallas Mavericks for Quentin Grimes, and they get their own second-round pick back. Basically, say cost-cutting measure. Caleb Martin's situation has not worked out better. Quentin Grimes, younger, fine, whatever. And also, it looks like KJ Martin might be on his way out. This looks like maybe an attempt to duck under the tax. There's been some rumors about Paul George. I think it's probably smoke, whatever. During all this, Bill, out of nowhere, I looked at my phone and I was like, what? Out of nowhere, they were like, Embiid is available tonight. They played the Mavericks, and he had a triple-double. He hasn't played in a month. It
was amazing. Look, I sort of like half followed it because of the reasons we talked about. He was amazing. And I mean, look, Luka was hurt. I understand. But normally you'd sort of expect maybe a lull when your superstar is traded, but it sounds like the Mavs played pretty well. It sounds like Christie played pretty well. I mean, Joel Embiid was the reason that they won the game. I mean, Joel Embiid was amazing. I don't want to say it again because I know you're tired of hearing it. But every time he does this stuff, I think, I don't know if he gets in and they didn't play in, they win a couple, they get the right matchup. Maybe.
I'd be surprised if they don't get in at this point because the Bulls just sold off Zach LaVine. They're almost certainly going to move on from Vooch before the deadline. The Sixers right now are a half game out of that 10 spot. You figure the Bulls are going to fall off. Now, interestingly here, despite the fact that the Brooklyn Nets had an idea of like, hey, we'll move on from Cam Johnson. We'll tank this season, whatever. The Nets could potentially be in play. They somehow won a game tonight against the Houston Rockets where they were down 4 with 9 seconds left and ended up winning the game. I don't know.
The problem is you don't want to catch Orlando. You want to be the 9-10 and have to win a couple games so that you're playing, I think, Cleveland and up. That's just me. I'd rather play Cleveland than Boston if I'm the Sixers. If it's a play-in situation. And then, by the way, I don't even know what it is. Boston 4 or 5 games. I mean, they're probably not going to catch Cleveland, but Cleveland hasn't been awesome.
They're 4.5 back of Cleveland right now.
If Boston goes on some 11 or 12 game tear and Cleveland is, okay, but yes, they're going to get in, but they could make a run in the playoffs, John, if Embiid's healthy. That's what I'm saying.
They're going to get in, but then, okay, so
to the playoffs.
Paul George hasn't played. He's got a pinky injury. There's all this smoke about like, hey, would they swap Vince Goodwill from Yahoo said, there was some thought about would they swap him for Jimmy Butler because Embiid likes Jimmy Butler. Then all of a sudden there was rumors about the Warriors might be interested in Paul George. And then people in Philadelphia are talking about the Hawks potentially being all of a sudden there's like talk about Paul George because he hasn't played well. They just gave him the deal that the Clippers wouldn't give him, a 5-year max contract. He's coming off of a career shooting year and then he goes to Philadelphia and he forgets how to shoot. I still think he's a better player than Jimmy Butler. He's younger than Jimmy Butler by a fraction and two-way player. At least he can shoot. Jimmy Butler not known for his shooting. However, there are people clamoring now, Philadelphia media members and Sixers watchers who are like, maybe they need to get off the Paul George deal. I don't know. I don't know what this team is anymore. I don't know which way to go.
Here's the actual, I think, proper takeaway.
Okay.
And this is going to be a shot at Daryl Morey. And I like Daryl, but Embiid has showcased again that, and I know he's not healthy very often, but if he's healthy, you are capable of making an amazing run. And what you really need to do is build a team that can kind of be what the Clippers have been without Kawhi, right? That's what you need, a spunky team that plays great defense and has somebody else who can score and sort of overachieves so that Embiid can miss all the time in the world. Because if you can be on the shelf for 3 or 4 weeks and come out and just score a triple-double against a fired-up Mavs team who just lost Luka but got AD, then if you could just not be the 9 or 10 or 11 seed, if you could be the 5 or 6, if Daryl constructed a better basketball team and it made the secondary guy someone who was healthy, maybe the Sixers could actually hold on to this idea when Embiid is fine. If Embiid was on the Clippers, if you swapped Embiid and Kawhi Leonard, we'd be talking about, you know what? If Embiid starts playing a lot in April, I don't know. This team is pretty spunky.
I'm not doing it. I'm not even gonna entertain the idea.
Not good enough.
Well, the team's not good enough, and I'm not going to entertain the idea that he's going to be healthy and available when it comes around for the play-in. They might end up getting into the play-in anyway. I think that it'll be less about them being good and more about the Bulls just being bad enough to get out of the play-in. But I'm not going to trick myself into another year of, hey, what if he might be good, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
You don't have to. I'm not trying to sell you because your residual sadness or whatever it is has sort of made its way to me talking to you about this all the time. I'll just say, and I can't remember, but didn't they take the Knicks to 7 or 6? I mean, they almost won that series last year.
Yeah. They've almost won a lot of series in the Joel Embiid
I know.
And they never do. They never pull it off.
I get it.
Should we talk about just the Houston Rockets absolutely imploding against the Nets tonight and whether or not they're in on this whole KD thing? So the Houston Rockets were up against the Brooklyn Nets. I just mentioned it. The Nets somehow found a way to win that game. They're up 4 with 9 seconds left, Bill. And the Rockets, who I love and are a very good defensive team, with 9 seconds left, gave up 2 3-pointers to lose that game in Brooklyn. It's a second night of a back-to-back, and they lost to the Knicks last night too. I thought that they played well in both of I thought that they played well in both of those games, and then all of a sudden they lose both.
I mean, I'm not an NBA player. Obviously, I don't have their
Sure.
I'm not an NBA player, and I've gone on what is tonight, Tuesday? I've gone on Tuesday to work in New York before and just woken up, found myself at 8 a.m. at a diner, having not slept on. I mean, there's a lot to do in New York City.
That happens.
It happens. There's a lot.
You're like, I'm going to go to bed early. And the next thing you know, you're on the subway at 3 a.m.
Did you ever know Joe Goodman when he covered the Miami Heat? My brother and I left him at 9 a.m. at a bar on a Wednesday. Like, we're out of here. We just Irish goodbye, Joe. I'm sorry.
Leave. Yeah.
So maybe is that. By the way, who imploded more? Did the Rockets implode or did the Nets implode? Because they don't want to win that game.
Yeah, the Nets.
Sean Marks wasn't happy, I'm sure.
Well, speaking of imploding, so last night, just to tie all this together with the Suns and Kevin Durant, whatever. Last night, the Suns ended up losing at Portland. Portland all of a sudden is just winning a bunch of games, and the Suns didn't want to, which I think is sort of exacerbating all this KD chatter here. So we had previously discussed the Rockets having just a ton of picks, a ton of young talent. I think that Amen Thompson is off the board, and probably Alperen Şengün is off the board as well, almost certainly off the board. And then everybody else is probably available with a plethora of picks.
Okay.
The Rockets had previously said, hey, we're going to be good this year and we'll just figure it out next year. We're not going to move anything. If Kevin Durant becomes available now, don't they have to get in on the sweepstakes? Okay. This is one of the guys that they were linked to.
Yeah, let me answer, and I'll ask you a question that would have been stupid 48 hours ago, but isn't now because of obviously Luka Doncic and the fact he's a Laker. I have said before, and I think this is right, if I'm the Rockets, outside of a couple exceptions, Durant being one, I'm letting it bake. I'm letting it cook longer. I'm not messing with the recipe. I'm looking, as we've discussed a lot. I'm looking at the Thunder and just saying last year, a lot of pressure. A lot of people, smart people, were like, Presti's got to go get help. He's got picks. Go get somebody. Didn't need to. They're the favorites by far in the West, and they haven't and they did some things in free agency, but they didn't. They still have those assets. I think the same applies to the Rockets. I really do. And I'll ask you, how many players in the NBA are the exception? I mean, you can't put Victor Wembanyama on the list because no one's ever traded him. Kevin Durant, I mean, Giannis is an exception. Probably he's not getting traded by Milwaukee. Embiid, I wouldn't trade for Embiid if I were the Rockets for the reasons that we've talked. I wouldn't do it for the reasons we've talked about. Obviously, Luka's not getting traded by the Denver Nuggets. I mean, Shea's not getting traded by the Thunder. That's done. Kevin Durant's the most realistic exception to this rule. And he might be the only player that I would go. KD and Giannis are the only two players I can think of if I'm Houston where I am making seismic changes. And by the way, you are cashing out on some of these guys for the long term to invest in a KD. Giannis is younger, but a KD. I mean, KD's not going to be KD, I don't think, in 3 years. So it's this year and 26 for the finals and 27. Maybe it's a 3-year window. Maybe. But I'm doing it for Kevin. Yeah, I'm doing it for Kevin Durant. But I'm not doing it for many guys because I think the Rockets are going to be in the mix in the years ahead.
They're already in the mix. I mean, they're so good. And you know that I'm with you. But they this is one of those scenarios where when they ended up giving the Nets control of their draft back in exchange for the Suns picks, this is kind of what they've been setting themselves up for. Now, in the future, it was kind of if it's a year or two from now, maybe it's a Devin Booker ask out. But if all of a sudden it's a KD ask out, then you have to think about, hey, we've got all these picks. How many would it take? And then if we're not going to move, they're definitely not going to move Amon Thompson and almost certainly not Şengün. If it's some combination of I don't know, Cam Whitmore, Jayson Tate, Tariq, and I'm not saying all these guys. I'm just saying
I think it's several, John.
And some, but they have several guys to move and picks. That would be attractive. Now, this also brings me back to what the hell are the Suns doing if they all of a sudden decide to move Kevin Durant when they traded that 2031 earlier? It's pick a lane.
I have a theory. I was thinking about it, and Matt Ishbia is not as good at his job. He's a guy that owns the Suns, bought the Suns, treats it like it's a fantasy sport, and obviously it sounds like he's surrounded by people who don't give him good advice and tell him the truth. If they're going to trade Durant, we don't know if they are. To your point about what were they doing, swapping out the 2031 unprotected for the 3 picks that aren't very valuable. What's changed might be that watching Luka Doncic get traded to the Lakers, maybe it's eye-opening. Maybe to him it's just maybe it gave someone a chance. I don't know, the chance to say we're not doing this right. We're falling. Now we're behind LA for 10 years. That's correct.
They're definitely not doing it right.
But now, if you look at this, you're not going to win now, and how many teams do you think have a ridiculously bright future in the West for the next 7 years? The Lakers, I think, do. The Thunder obviously do. The
Lakers do.
The
now.
Rockets do. The Spurs do.
Rockets, Lakers.
The Grizz. You said San Antonio? San Antonio. That's 5 teams that are legitimately
those are for sure teams. And then who knows what else happens because so much is always in flux. But yes.
So the idea of someone selling them on, look, Matt, you have to rebuild. You have to build around Booker. We can't win now. It's over, right? You're not getting past any of these teams, and now you're not getting past the Lakers. Maybe that reaches him. And their odds went from 40-1 to 16-1 with the trade. I don't know. Maybe it's because what you have to do is you have to build around Booker. You move on from Durant. You tell Bradley Beal we're rebuilding. He's not going to want to be there when that happens. And maybe you can get something. But if Jimmy Butler's not coming in, I'm not even sure what you're getting for Bradley Beal. Yeah, it's a hot mess there. I don't know.
It's a hot mess in Phoenix for sure, but it has been a lot of fun to discuss. We're going to continue this discussion tomorrow. Our plan, provided that not another big name gets traded between right now and tomorrow morning, our plan is to do the usual show slightly later than normal. We'll be live on YouTube at 12:15. You can find us over there at Beyond the Arc CBS. So come and join us. We're going to do just more of this, more of the latest rumors and reports tomorrow leading up to the trade deadline. And then, as I mentioned, on Thursday, following the trade deadline at 3 p.m. Eastern, Bill and I will be on CBS Sports HQ, our streaming network. And then right after that, probably around 3:30ish, we'll be back on YouTube to do a full trade deadline breakdown. So just all the trade deadline stuff and content that you can handle right here at Beyond the Arc. So come and join us. But for now, for our NBA insider, Bill Reiter, who's going to get a little brief timeout, right? You get to sleep for an hour or something. We'll find out.
I really hope so.
I'm
ready, John. I love sleep.
He's going to sleep for an hour, and then we'll be back at it in the morning. I'm John Gonzalez. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.